Hello and welcome to part 2 of my video tutorial. In the last video I showed you how I copied and enlarged an image using a pantograph and how I transfer that image onto the canvas using the prick and pounce technique. You can see the image that I transferred here drawn in chalk, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how I paint the grisaille or black and white layer in tempera paint. Now the reference image that you saw in part 1 I've printed off here in black and white, and I'm going to use this image as a reference guide for painting the black and white layer. Now you might be wondering, if I want to paint this black and white image, why have I painted the canvas this dark red colour? There is a method to this madness, as it were, which will hopefully become clear as I start painting the black and white layer. It's kind of hard to describe in words, and I think it's better just to wait and see how it actually works. So if we cut to palette cam here, we can see the ingredients I need to mix tempera paints. I have my pigment, vine black and zinc white, which I've pre-grinded in distilled water. I also have my medium here, which is by Lukas. I also have a pot of water for washing the brushes, and also have some more distilled water for diluting the tempera mix. So to mix the paint, I just simply grab a dollop of the pigment I want to use, which in this case is zinc white. Now because I've pre-grinded the pigment in distilled water, the pigment is now in a sort of paste form, which is actually much more easier to work with. It's less powdery. So once I have enough pigment, I just grab the medium and just pour in a little amount, and then I simply just mix together the medium with the pigment until the satisfactory consistency is reached. Now make sure you only mix the amount of tempera that you plan to use in a painting session. The thing is, with tempera you can't put it back in a jar once it's been mixed, because it will just eventually dry out and become unusable. So now the tempera's been mixed, I just want to get my brush, which is a white hoghair bristle brush, and I just want to load it with some tempera and start painting the major highlights. So what I'm doing here is applying a thin layer of the egg tempera zinc white, and because of the quick drying nature of the egg tempera, I'm able to build up the highlights slowly in lots of layers or passes. So once that first pass is completed, I then begin again on a second pass or layer of the egg tempera paint. So you can see here I'm painting over and emphasizing some of the previous highlights just to make them brighter and so that they stand out more. What also might be noticeable in this sped up video is how quickly the tempera dries, and how it actually, once it's dry, it appears a little bit darker than how it was first originally painted when wet. So it's good to maybe wait a few minutes to see how the paint dries and whether you need to put any subsequent layers on top of that layer in order to achieve the desired brightness.
Life is just always mysterious and surprising. You never know what's around the next corner. You never know what's around the next corner. So. You never know what's around the next corner. So.
Okay, so by this point I've built up the highlights to the desired amount of brightness, and what I've also done is basically left all of the shadows clear so that the red paint of the canvas is still showing through. What I want to do now is just let this dry for about 3 to 4 hours just to make sure that it's properly dry. And once it is dry, I'm going to give this painting a scumble, which is what you see that I'm doing here. Now a scumble is it's an overall layer of semi-opaque tempera paint. And you can see here that I'm applying the layer and then brushing off or sponging off any excess paint. Now, once I've applied the scumble, I just want to go in and reassert some highlights that might have been faded a little bit by the scumble. Now, I've let that scumble dry for another hour or so, but I'm not too happy with the desired effect, so I'm going to give it one last scumble with a little bit more of an opaque layer of white tempera paint. You're probably wondering why I'm doing this, and what's the desired effect that I want to achieve with a scumble. Well, it's basically I'm trying to unite all of the mid-tones that come between the lowlights and the highlights. And you might be able to see that the more scumbles that I add, the grayer or less red the underlying red canvas is becoming. And this in turn helps make a smoother transition between the various tones, the lowlights, the highlights and the midtones. So what I want to do now is just let that paint dry for about 2 to 3 hours again, and what I want to do is switch to vine black, and I want to mix that up with the tempera medium just like I did with the zinc white. So with the vine black I'm going to paint the lowlights and the shadows of the picture, again in thin layers as well. So now I've added all the shadows and lowlights. The grisaille or the black and white layer is essentially complete. So by using the process of first starting with this brown reddish canvas and then building up thin layers of the white egg tempera along with the thin opaque scumbles, and then finally adding the shadows and lowlights in the vine black tempera, what I've managed to achieve is all of these subtle grey tones that come between the white and the black by not actually mixing any grey tones themselves. So the grey tones that you see, it's actually just the red background coming through the layer of white egg tempera, and how thickly or thinly the tempera is applied over the background determines the tone. It's basically called optical blending, and if you know how to do it right, it's actually quicker and less work intensive than having to physically mix and blend all these various grey tones in between the whites and the blacks. Anyway, so that about wraps it up for this video. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments, and I'll see you for the next video tutorial where I'm going to be painting over the grisaille layer in layers of colour. So see you then.
You never know what's around the next corner.